Beauty and the Beast is my all-time favorite Disney movie, and it's been that way for many years. As a matter of fact, the closest thing that Disney has gotten to having another movie steal that title away is Zootopia. While Zootopia is the most original movie that Disney has ever made, Beauty and the Beast, for the time that it was made, is a saving grace for the company as a whole. It was a time when Disney was best known for adapting and bringing fairy tales to life in a way that only Disney could. And the result was a movie with really great characters, an amazing story, breathtaking animation, and the first animated film to ever be nominated for Best Feature, only to lose to another film that basically had the exact same plot. Seriously, fuck the Academy Awards. So as you can imagine, I wasn't very optimistic about the idea of Disney itself making a live-action remake of one of my all-time favorite animated films. And while I did feel annoyed about the idea, I will say that my expectations going into this were pretty low. Mostly because I knew from the start that it wasn't going to be as good or even better than the animated version. My idea of Disney's Beauty and the Beast that's better than the animated version would be the Chicago Broadway play that I saw with my dad. It was faithful to the animated version while still adding new material to feel fresh. And something about the way that the play was directed really feels like it had a much stronger grasp of focus than the animated version itself. But I'm getting off topic. Let's talk about this movie specifically. Basically, every dumb review of this movie I've seen up to this point has basically been the same thing. It's mostly just whining and complaining over the desire to compare it to the animated version, because this live-action version really is doing everything in its power to be exactly like the animated version. And while that is one of the problems with the movie, it's not the main problem with the film, and it's not the only thing that people should have their minds on when reviewing it. I myself did not like this movie very much, and the people who feel the need to compare it to the animated version are not really looking at the exact problems. They're not being informative or presenting the movie accurately. So with that in mind, I'm going to do my best to be the most original review of the new Beauty and the Beast. Now, firstly, I have to say that Emma Watson, while she's normally a good actor, was not a really good choice for the role of Belle. It may be just me, but I thought she was too young to really capture the look and the tone that the character properly presents. And aside from that, I have to confess that her acting in this film is abysmally bland. She never really felt like she had the appropriate facial reaction to what she was facing, and the tone in her voice wasn't really matching with the emotion that the scenes are trying to convey for her. I'm sure that Emma could be a really good singer if she practiced, but from what I saw in this movie, it's really not one of her strong points. On the other hand, the Beast was really lacking in sympathy. Even for the context that his character was presented in, he felt mean-spirited in a way that was out of place. He doesn't put any effort into warming up to Belle on his own, and he doesn't really feel any interest in getting to know her. It's kind of being forced onto him by the castle servants, which kind of weakens the point of their relationship. It's badly executed to the point where when he finally does start to connect with Belle, it feels unearned. There was no actual spark or kickstart to the relationship, so everything that happens after he rescues her from the wolves feels kind of fake. His backstory is also one of the crappiest that I've ever seen, not because it's written badly, but because it just blows over everybody's heads. It's brought up twice for a couple of seconds in the same 2 minutes, and after that, it's never explored again. This was an extremely failed attempt to give sympathy to the character, and the material they were using was loosely connected to the play that I loved so much. Gaston, while more interesting than the two protagonists, still felt like a very one-note and boring villain with no real complexity. His desire for Belle this time around came across as very unsettling, having this uncomfortable amount of malice to it. And any amount of sympathy that could have been given to the character is ultimately destroyed when he leaves Maurice to die in the middle of the woods to be eaten by wolves. This came across as not only uncomfortably mean-spirited, but lazy. There were so many more interesting ways that they could have segued into the subplot where everyone thinks that Maurice is crazy, and the way that they do it here just feels really forced. And a huge part of that is because of how this scene is executed, how they just brush over the fact that Gaston was willing to commit attempted murder. I would have given credit to the movie for at least trying to give more depth to Maurice as he actually starts talking about his late wife and building a connection with his daughter, but the film hardly touches upon either of those aspects, and on top of that, he comes across as an idiot. He put no effort into making his presence in the castle aware, and he brought it upon himself when he stopped to pick a rose that he wasn't supposed to. The biggest problem with the film by far is that its pacing is so fucking awful. There are far too many instances where they literally just rush through the scenes for the sake of the new material they wanted to add to the story. The scene where Belle intrudes into the West Wing and the Beast stops her for doing so is just rushed over our heads like everything else. And the scene where the castle servants take Belle out of her prison cell and introduce her to her new room and stuff her into this new dress, it is all done so awkwardly and just so uncomfortably fast. You're never given enough time to just relax and absorb what is going on. As a matter of fact, the pacing can get so bad that it ends up affecting the emotions of the characters that they're supposed to be feeling, and they end up feeling the wrong feelings. Like when Beast has to let Belle go. He's sad, and then he's happy, and then he's sad again, for whatever reason. I don't get why he would start to feel cheerful over the knowledge that he's gonna spend the rest of his life as a beast and all of his servants are basically gonna die. It could be because the Beast realized that he finally learned to love, that he's happier than he normally is, but this still isn't the proper reaction to have given the circumstances. Despite all this, I will say that the movie had some good stuff going for it. For one thing, I really liked LeFou. His character is treated with much more respect here, and he goes through actual development and his own arc, as opposed to just being a comedic foil for Gaston to work off of. And as cheap as this may sound, I actually really liked the visual aspects of the film. Granted, the designs of the castle servants definitely look off-putting and sometimes pretty ugly, but when the movie needs to look good, it really, really looks good. The sets, the backgrounds, the designs of the castle, the CGI, the song numbers. This is literally on par with the new Jungle Book. It just looks frickin' gorgeous. Something that I didn't expect this movie to do is that it actually takes time to address some of the illogical moments from the animated version. Those two things being that everybody just forgot that Beast and the castle existed, and that it's only snowing around the castle. The first one fairly addresses how nobody in Belle's village would seem to remember the fact that there is a looming castle near their village and that there is a prince and his servants within the castle. Perhaps he occasionally texted them for his fancy parties. The second one helps to clear up the passage of time that was admittedly a little bit hard to follow in the animated version. Because of the sudden appearance of the snow, it's hard to tell how long Belle was in the castle. It's impossible to assume that she was there for weeks or months because there's no way that Maurice could have been in that forest by himself for that long before dying. With the snow merely being another side effect of the Enchantress's spell, the flow of time feels much more consistent in this film. However, that's only a few good things against the bad stuff that this movie does, which is unfortunately quite a lot. This leads to one more problem that the film has, and that problem is that it completely fails as an adaptation. Now, the purpose of an adaptation is to tell the story faithfully, but not in the exact same way that the original did. If this movie is trying to be an adaptation of the animated version as opposed to the actual book that this story came from, then it just failed spectacularly. Because it puts so much time into copying the animated version, it doesn't do anything unique or interesting with the material. It doesn't even do a good job emitting sympathy for Belle when we do see what happened to her mother. As an adaptation, I cannot deny that this new Beauty and the Beast is bad because it fails to follow both rules that I just established. It doesn't tell the story of the source material faithfully, and it is so obsessed with just being a copy of the animated version. And even that's not the entire issue, because even if you're not comparing this to the animated version, this movie on its own is just a poorly written, poorly acted, and poorly paced bore. My advice, go watch Logan instead. I assure you, you will have a much better time watching Hugh Jackman and a 9-year-old girl ripping people to shreds than a remake of a beloved classic that really should not exist, especially when the material that is being adapted from is still fresh in people's minds. I apologize that I wasn't as energetic about this one as I normally am for my reviews. I'm just kinda tired at the time of doing this recording, and I've got to get ready to review another episode of Samurai Jack tomorrow, so there's that. And I'm still in the process of doing scripts for my 2016 movie reviews. I just finished doing Suicide Squad, and I'm gonna be moving on to work on Kubo and the Two Strings. I'm sure that if you're a fan of my content, you'll really be looking forward to what I have to say about that film, because I really did love it that much. Also, if you haven't done so already, I'd like to believe that my review of this movie saved you the trouble of having to see Doug and Rob's shitty video on the subject, so you're welcome.